Hello, everyone, and welcome to PrimeTime League, the show that promises to get you as close as legally possible to the world of LOL Esports throughout the 2015 season. I'm Rivington Bisson III, along with my co-host Joshua Jatt Leesman, and from the first champion select of the LCS to the final Nexus explosion at Worlds, we'll be here along with the rest of the PrimeTime League squad to make sure you don't miss a thing.
Yeah, and coming up in our first ever episode of PTL, there have been a lot of changes, both in and out of the LCS in the offseason. And we'll take a look at the format and the rule changes with Riot's Nick Allen.
That's right. Shox, Quickshot, and Deficio will join us from Berlin to talk about the big stories and player moves in the European LCS, while Freak and Kobe will be here to cover the North American scene. And because PrimeTime League is global, we'll also check in with the major regions around the globe, with Chobra telling us how things are shaping up in League of Legends Champions Korea, known as the LCK, and Pastry Time will give us the lowdown on the scene in China's League of Legends Pro League, the LPL.
Yeah, Freak will also help us take a look at PrimeTime League's Fantasy League, which includes participants like Imagine Dragons, Freddie Wong, and of course, Xpeke.
That's right. Plus, we've got the Penta, the last hit, and a sneak peek at the new home of the European LCS. But first up, we get to start the premiere episode of PrimeTime League with an incredible announcement about the 2015 World Championship.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Earlier today, it was announced that Europe will host the 2015 League of Legends World Championship. It will be held across multiple countries, with the group stages, quarterfinals, semifinals, and final being held in different cities. And while the names of the cities and countries have not been released yet, those details will be forthcoming in the next few months.
That's right. And even though the 2015 World Championship might seem like a long way off right now, it will be here before you know it. And while we're talking about Europe, let's go ahead and take a look at the European LCS.
Yeah, the 2014 season ended with Alliance winning their first ever European Championship. Fnatic fell short for the first time in their history, but second place was good enough to qualify them for their third trip to Worlds.
That's yep. SK Gaming joined Alliance and Fnatic at Worlds, but unfortunately, none of these teams made it out of the group stages, leading to a lot of noise coming out of the NA chat rooms, as you could imagine. But that was last year, and a lot of things have happened since then.
Yeah, during the offseason, there was a massive shakeup among the European teams, with newcomers winning their way in, old teams getting blown up, and a ton of roster changes for just about every single squad. Let's actually take a look at the 10 teams who will be playing in the 2015 European Spring Split.
Let's do it. Up first, the 2014 European champions, formerly known as Alliance, now known as Elements. This year, Froggen and crew will be taking the stage with a new name, a new logo, and a new AD carry, while Fnatic and SK's names and logos are about the only thing that's the same about those teams.
Last year's World Championship participants will be joined by 4 other returning LCS squads: Roccat, the Copenhagen Wolves, Gambit, and Meet Your Makers, who were formerly known as the Super Hot Crew.
And making their European LCS debut from the Challenger Series are the most mythical team in the European LCS, the Unicorns of Love.
Can't wait to see those guys. And finally, there's H2K Gaming and Giants Gaming, who qualified during the ever-important expansion tournament that happened.
And now for a closer look at the biggest moves and storylines for the 2015 European Spring Split, I'm happy to be joined by our crew of European casters. Beaming in from Berlin, I'd like to welcome Shox, Quickshot, and Deficio to PrimeTime League. And now, before you guys dive into the EU LCS, I've got to get your thoughts on the 2015 World Championship heading to your home continent. How are you guys feeling about the announcement?
Well, thank you very much, Riv. Of course, we are super excited about Worlds coming to Europe this year. I was at the All-Star Gaming Paris last year, and it was one of the best crowds I've ever been around. I can only imagine what it's going to be like here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I loved going to Wembley last year. We've had a lot of fun when we visited Poland. Basically, any country we've gone to, the crowds have been awesome, and I'm hoping they tear the roof off again. One of the big perks, it's going to be a much shorter commute for all of our EU viewers. You don't have to fly like 12 million time zones.
I'm just super hyped because, after all, it's Worlds.
Well, not only do you get Worlds in Europe this year, but you get a brand new studio in a new location, too.
Yeah, that's right. And we are actually here inside our new Berlin studio. You can see a sneak peek of it just behind us. And I can't wait for people to check it out tomorrow during our games.
And not only is our studio new, but we have a lot of new players as well, as some old LCS veterans who now find themselves on new teams. So it's going to be super exciting once we start.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, we actually have some breaking news concerning a player move in Europe. Meet Your Makers mid laner Corey, who most of you know as Selfie, has suddenly left the team. What can you tell us about this?
Well, Riv, all we know right now is that he left the team on his own. We don't have that much information, but we think that the future from him on the team is doubtful.
Yeah, and Blizzer here, the guy who's going to replace him tomorrow, he's a fairly young Danish kid actually in this mid lane. He plays a lot of assassins, like pretty much every single new mid laner we've gotten into the LCS, so he's going to fit in just nicely. And of course, if you have Selfie or Corey on your fantasy lineup, you have to go and change it very fast.
Yeah, definitely double check that. Other than Corey's sudden departure, of course, we do also have to take a look at the roster changes from the off-season. We've taken a look at all of the players that we think are going to be the biggest movers and shakers, and we're going to give you the top 5 players that we feel are going to impact the season. Let's start things off with my number 5. It's going to be Forgiven. I think Forgiven joining SK Gaming is going to be a massive move. He has added GRE to his nickname, obviously proud to be Greek, and you know, this is the player that Reckless himself touted as one of the most difficult to play against during the spring split of last year when he was playing for the Copenhagen Wolves. The one thing I do like about this is giving another carry to SK Gaming where Candy Panda sort of failed and struggled, and I think Forgiven's mechanics are going to shine through.
Yeah, especially the carry part is the important part here, because Forgiven as a player, he wants the entire team to just put all the resource, all the focus on him, allow him to carry here. So Svensson, we know he loves to gank the bottom lane, go down there, help out Forgiven in the laning phase, win it, and just snowball the game for a bit. I think he's going to fit in nicely in terms of like the play style, but we have to see if they can actually work it out as a team outside of the game.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see. The first thing they have is the game versus Rocket, so that'll be a big test for SK Gaming. For me, the number 4 on the list of player moves is Gambit acquisition of Cabochard. We of course saw him in action at IEM Cologne. Most recently, he was a force there, and after an impressive performance for the former World Power, it looks like Gambit has found a consistent top laner who doesn't rely on swagger and a feed-to-win strategy.
Very, very true. I mean, Cabochard, he looked very good at IEM Cologne, to be honest. He had some solid performance against CLG. Zion Spartan couldn't really do anything against him in terms of like one-on-one. He plays also a lot of different champions. We had 6 different picks in 6 games at IEM. So I think actually Gambit has found the best possible free agent or challenger top laner they could, and he's going to do just nicely for them.
I just think it's super interesting because he played for Gambit before Gambit ran Cubot in the promotion tournament, and then they swapped him back out for Cabochard. So we need to see if there was problems or what the decision-making was behind that, but Cabochard definitely stepped up at IEM.
Yeah, and also when he played for NIP before, well, we can say after he stopped for Gambit in London, he was widely regarded as one of the best challenger top laners all around, and all the NIP members talk very highly of him, says he's working super hard, and he's just a nice guy to be around. So I think really Gambit has a good player here.
Yeah, we'll have to find out how it pans out. Talking about NIP, Nuke Duck, formerly of NIP, is going to be our number 3 player. He made his name with the Lemon Dogs in the Summer Split of 2013, went to the World Championships, and he's always been a very gutsy player. You know, he likes his assassins, he likes his aggressive play. He's replaced Overpower in the mid lane for Rocket. Overpower's gone to the top lane. And, you know, this is a guy that I've been very critical of in the past because he's made and broken games before. And I just want to see how he settles and how he finds himself, because his guts and his bravado has sometimes come back to bite him.
Yeah, I have read some interviews with him lately where he said, well, I've broadened my champion pool. I'm not only playing assassins anymore. I feel very comfortable. And maybe most importantly, he feels like he's matured as a player, behavior in and out of game. And it'll be very interesting to see, with all that baggage now gone, how good can he perform on the Rift?
Yeah, I just think Nuke Dog is exactly what Rocket actually needs in their lineup to become a top team in Europe, because when they had Overpower in the mid lane, it was a very passive laner. Jankos never really ganked for him because there was no reason. He was just sitting back and farming anyway. Nuke Dog is completely different. He's playing all these assassins. He wants to create like plays and kills all the time. So with Jankos and him together, if they can get a first spot, they can completely snowball the game. And also Nuke Dog, he's such a confident player. Back when he went to Worlds in Season 3 or 2013, he played against Faker, and he locked in Swain the very first time he plays against the guy.
Yeah, and we remember how poorly that turned out
for him.
Sure, okay,
fair enough.
On the same token, this is the guy that picked Riven into Overpower's Kale when they were still KMT.
So confidence is a good thing, but yes, you can be too confident, and that's a thing he has to learn. But I'm sure now with a few more games behind him, maybe even a year more maturing up. I think actually he's going to do just fine. But on to number 2 on our list. We're looking at Fnatic, and the mid lane change in here because Peke, the Season 1 world champion, and of course the backdoor expert, he's left his longtime team to form his own challenger squad, which left an opening that former H2K mid laner Febivan has filled, and I personally think he's the best choice for Fnatic. The guy was so impressive in the expansion tournament, and I'm really looking forward to see what he can do in the LCS.
Yeah, you say he's the best choice for Fnatic, but I got to turn it around and ask, is it the best choice for him? Because he had a very solid lineup going in H2K. He was kind of the leader there, and he had a very solid team going. It's quite a risk to go to, well, the big name organization Fnatic, but a totally new lineup.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that. I think it is quite a big move for Febivan, considering how long he played with H2K. But we're looking at, and considering that they lost their promotion series games and they had to qualify for the LCS through the expansion tournament. Maybe that's where the doubts in the roster comes from on Febivan's mind. But he has to have some faith in Huni and Reignover, in the rest of the Fnatic squad and Yellowstar's leadership to obviously leave what he knows and join this completely untested, unproven team in the LCS.
Yeah, and their first test is going to be the very first game of the European LCS versus Element, so Fragment versus Febivan. We're going to see how he swings that. Now finally, the player move that will have the biggest impact on the European LCS this year, it has to be Reckless. Moving to Elements to replace Tabs. I mean, what an amazing repertoire he has made up. Last summer, he led the league in KDA kills. He was named the MVP. It's basically the best AD carry that joins the best team in Europe. It's kind of like when Cristiano Ronaldo left Manchester United to join Real Madrid, to put it in perspective.
So while I agree that Reckless leaving Fnatic and joining Elements is a big deal and he's the biggest name we have seen change team, I don't actually think it's going to be the biggest impact in the LCS because Taps wasn't a bad AD carry. He was the second best we had here in Europe, and Reckless replacing him, he's a better player, he has a better work ethic. But that's about it. I mean, he's not going to make too much of a change in the lineup itself. And I think like Nuke joining Rocket here is going to be bigger for them, and it's going to have more impact than just Reckless stepping on to the lineup of Elements.
I don't know how much I agree with you. I do think it's a big deal that he's left Fnatic, but I think the Reckless to Elements move is probably the change that Elements needed in terms of mindset off the Rift. Yes, in-game ability may not be a big improvement, but putting a guy into the scenario with Wicked, with Frog, and with Shook, that's going to play for hours and hours on end. This might be that extra kick that gets Elements one step above to prevent a kaboom scenario like we saw last year.
So for me, the problem for Elements is not that they don't practice enough or don't play enough. They're one of the teams who put in the most hours in the game already when they had Taps beforehand. The problem is when it comes to actually taking whatever you learn in practice and using it in the game itself. We saw it I Am San Jose, pick and ban phase. I wasn't a fan of it, picking Zeref twice into like full hard engagement Cloud9. It didn't work out for them. Shook was very inconsistent as well. There are more problems for Elements they need to fix than just the AD carry position where they get Reckless now. But I agree, it is an upgrade, and I think they're going to be the strongest team in Europe.
All right, guys, now I'd like to shift from the biggest player moves to the storylines that you're watching heading into opening day tomorrow.
All right, I'm going to kick this one off. For me, it has to be Fnatic. I think this is the biggest story that we're looking at in the European LCS. You look at the old Fnatic, they had 3 consecutive LCS titles from 2013 spring to 2014 spring. They took second in the summer of last year. Only Alliance, now Elements, was able to beat them. And this is a team that completely owned and dominated Europe, that no longer exists. The only remaining member is Yellowstar.
Yeah.
This is a guy that's played in every single regular season game. My question is, was it the players from Fnatic that made the team, or was it the organization that made the team? And that's what we're going to find out. You're looking at guys that have got like a 70% win-loss ratio over the course of nearly 2 full years of LCS. Fnatic as a squad are mind-bogglingly good, and we've heard good things about Huni, Reignover, Steelback.
Yeah, I actually really like what Fnatic has done with the new members here. I know there's a lot of talk on social medias about, oh, why not pick up Taps and Dexter and these free agents? But I think Fnatic just said, we don't want to try and replace our former big names with just known names like, again, Taps and Dexter. If we want to look for completely new players where there's not really any pressure, suddenly people are talking about Fnatic being a mid-tiered team here, even maybe a bottom tier with these new members. So there's no pressure, no real expectations for them. And they can just go in, work really hard, improve, slowly become better and better. And we know Huni has been doing fantastic in the weeks leading up to LCS here. So I'm really looking forward to see what he can do and if he can become one of the best, if not the best top laner here in Europe.
I've been inspired by Freak a little bit, and I do think I have to ask the question. When you look at Fnatic, the question is simple. Is there reign over, or will reign over, usher in a new crown. And only time will tell.
Yeah, we will see. I do think that a yellow star in that lineup, it will be so important because he has that much experience. He has to take this new young player under his wing, and we will see how that pans out. I see good things for them. Maybe not immediately. They gotta warm up in the LCS. In their first game versus Elements, it's going to be such a test.
Yeah, it will be, but Yellow Star is probably the perfect member to actually stay behind because he was the main shot caller on Fnatic before and he's been on the team for such a long time. So he will be able to help out Steel back in the lane and also guide everyone else as long as the communication works out.
Yeah. And while Fnatic find themselves trying to rebuild a dynasty, I'm incredibly excited for the LCS debut of the Unicorns of Love. They have a ton of hype behind them, and the most recent hype, of course, comes from the IEM San Jose. But we'll get to that in a minute. But we can't forget, of course, that they were playing those unique picks long before that in the challenger scene. There was Vizicachi and Kikis. They just pull out crazy champions. We had the TF at IEM San Jose. We had Vizicachi playing Swain in the final of the Challenger Series versus NIP. We had actually when they qualified versus MYM 3-2, it was Power of Evil on Cassiopeia in the final deciding game to get them into the LCS. Very impressive. Then, of course, it became a little bit quiet after they qualified. They replaced Julius with Kikis, and then the Unicorns of Love, they got fan voted into the Intel Extreme Master San Jose as the underdogs.
It's a fantastic story, of course, and they will be a very fun team to follow unless you have to cast them in the pick and ban phase because you have no idea what's actually going on.
Luck.
But when you look at this lineup, yes, they have all these new unique picks. Problem is when you come into the LCS and you play every single week and you scrim against the LCS teams, it becomes very hard to actually hide your picks and have this surprise factor anymore because people are going to find out what you play, how you play these different champions as well, and be able to punish it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add to that, though, because I think not only did they play these unique picks and win, the way they played those champions, the way we saw the Swain, the Cassiopeia, the Jungle TF, it was executed so well that I think if you remove those unique and individual strategies, their individual ability is still good enough to carry them on standard meta. We need to see that happen before it's 100% true. But I think from what we've seen already, the ingenuity is one side, but they're also good enough to play standard and pick up wins.
That's what we're going to have
yeah,
to see. Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
But you mentioned the individual quality. We have to mention Power of Evil, kind of a prodigy there in the mid lane. As mentioned at the Intel Extreme Masters at San Jose, he absolutely bodied Bjergsen. It was with the help of that jungle TF in one of those games, but also one-on-one. He actually had a KDA of 14 in those two games versus TSM, and Bjergsen had a KDA of 0.70. That says it all. If you can come to an event like that and just hold your own in the mid lane, knowing how heavy the mid lane is going to be here in Europe, that means a lot. But as you mentioned, Fisho, it's all one thing, but how can it all hold up in the LCS?
We're just going to have to see. I mean, I actually really like the fact you mentioned Power of Evil and the mid laners in Europe because that's my storyline going into the LCS. We have so many insanely strong mid laners here. We have 6 new guys joining the LCS. Power of Evil, of course, is one of them. Then we have players like Febiven, who's going to Fnatic. We have, of course, Nukedog joining Rocket, as we mentioned earlier, or rejoining the LCS in his situation. And Europe has long been a region known for its famous and very strong mid laners, but we actually haven't seen anyone join like the elite ranks of Froggen, Xpeke, and Alex Ish. We always talk about how we have these good mid laners. Nobody really get up to that level. And we're now looking at 3 years, back since Season 2, nobody has joined him. Froggen was close. Sorry, Froggen. Bjergsen was close. Same Danish.
He left
He
us.
went to NA, so he's no longer an EU mid laner. Of course, we had Nukedog in the summer split of 2013. He was knocking on the door, went back down to Challenger. We didn't see him for a year, so he didn't really join either. And this new class, they look good, but we have to see if they can actually perform in the LCS against Froggen, who's the only remaining of these elite mid laners, and he's, of course, the king you have to beat if you want to join.
Yeah, we will see, and it is going to be a big test for all these. Because Febiven, yeah, he did so good in Challenger, and Power of Evil did so good in Challenger, but it will be very interesting to see if they get better by playing these good mid laners we have here, or if it maybe brings their skill level down. We'll see how it all plays out.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Lots of stuff to look forward to, and keep an eye on this split. We'll see you all again tomorrow as the European LCS starts up, and sorry again for stealing Bjergsen. Not really. But before we take a look at all the offseason moves in the North American LCS, let's send it over to Jatt, who is joined by a man who can tell us all about the changes we'll see in the LCS this year.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome Riot's Nick Allen, Manager of League Operations, which means he is in charge of League Operations. And while that's impressive, last year you had a bit more fun. You got to open a bunch of envelopes and prove that you were the best envelope stuffer as well in North America. Let's actually take a look at that video. I think the title of that video was Competitive Integrity.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, obviously that was a bit of a snafu. It's going to be done better next year. That was the world's group stage draw for those of you that were wondering. But all kidding aside, because Nick Allen oversees the rules and tournament structure, scheduling, and more for the LCS, you're here to walk us through some of the big changes. And 10 teams is actually first up on the docket. Do you want to talk about what that means and why league operations decided to go from 8 to 10 teams this year?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're excited. I mean, it's awesome that we get to bring in all this new blood into the league, right? 2 new teams, a bunch of new matchups, and we think that's going to add a lot of excitement around the league, but also allowed us to meet a lot of format goals. The first is we got to completely eliminate Super Weeks, which is something we're really excited about. We actually got a ton of feedback from the teams. They were getting burnt out having to prepare for 5 matchups, and that was just a bit too much for them. It also just sort of hurt their ability to strategize. We wanted to be able to elongate the playoffs over the course of 3 weeks. So now the quarters, the semis, and the finals are all going to have their own weekend for teams to properly prepare, but also for fans and all of us to get super excited.
It's important. Those are the most enticing games. Last year it felt strange because we had 11 weeks of regular season. And we're like, all right, 1 week of playoffs,
Exactly.
10 hours of games, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to be able to sort of match the excitement by extending those out. It should be really good. And then lastly, teams were previously playing each other 4 times in the split. So when you got to towards the end, you've seen this 3 times, and it's not as exciting as it can be. So we wanted to reduce the exposure of those matchups. So teams are going to be playing each other twice now, and we're thinking it's going to make for a little bit more mystery around those matchups.
Well, for the TSM Cloud9 matches, I'd watch that any single week, but there's definitely some other matchups that are only good to see 10 times. So good variety there. Also another big change as far as honestly the spring split concerns, but world qualification in general. We have a new qualification system, championship points.
Yeah, we're also really excited about that. Previously, we just took the top 3 teams from the summer split, and it didn't really add a lot of value for like what do you do during the spring split? How is it important, right?
Stay in the LCS.
Just stay in, right? And we had some other appealing things, but overall, we wanted to add an exciting new way for teams to be qualifying for Worlds. And the first is we still want the hottest of the hot team to be the #1 seed going into the World Championship. So the winner of the summer split is going to automatically qualify, and they're going to be the #1 seed.
Yeah, and just kind of as an example, if this system were in place in Korea last year, we would have seen the KT Arrows going to Worlds.
Absolutely, yes. And we also want the most consistent teams going to Worlds as well. So we're going to take the highest championship point earner over the course of the spring and the summer split, and they're going to be the #2 seed going into the World Championship. And then lastly, we wanted to do something exciting for the #3 seed. And so we looked all over the place, and Korea had been doing something similar to this, but we're going to have an additional tournament after the summer split finals to find out who that last team is going to be. So we're going to take the #5 championship point earner. They're going to play the #4 championship point earner. The winner of that plays the #3, and the winner of that plays the #2. The winner of that is the #3 seed, and they're all going to be best of 5. Should be really exciting.
I'm sure you have a specific league ops term for that. I like to call it the Mortal Kombat bracket.
Yeah, we call it the gauntlet internally. Yeah, so it's great.
That works. It's nice. It's like a weird combination of rules from everywhere, but I really like the system.
Yeah, should be great.
One final question here I have for you as far as player movement, since we have so many international players in the LCS now, is exempt non-residents, who's allowed on teams, because there's a little bit of ambiguity still going on there. TSM in particular, it looks like they have 3 non-North American players on that team. How is that working, and how is it all legal?
Right, gotcha. So there's 3 classifications for players in the NA and EU LCS. You have residents, or players that have been in the region for 24 of the last 36 months. You have exempt non-residents. We needed to create a classification for players who were here when we implemented the rule. We didn't want them to sort of be
Here's
hurt
the
by
rule.
this. Exactly. Get out of here, right? So we wanted to make sure that they had local options. And then lastly are non-residents or international players that come over and that haven't been here for 24 months. And so the rule as it states, and it was a little bit wordy here, but you can have up to 2 exempt non-residents. I'm sorry, you can have as many exempt non-residents on your team as you want. But if you have 2 or more, you can't add any additional non-resident players because we want that regional identity to remain intact on the team. But where it breaks down a little bit is what happens if you have one
exempt non-resident, which is what happened with Team Impulse.
Exactly. So if you have 1 and not 2, you can actually still add 2 non-residents on your team, which is what Team Impulse has done. But in the case of TSM, they have 3 exempt non-residents, so they're not allowed to add any non-residents on their team.
All right, so it's all well and good. TSM's got 3 exempt exempt non-residents, and Team Impulse has their own thing going on.
Yeah.
That's it for my questions. However, you did do a Q&A earlier for League Operations, and we have a few actual questions from Twitter that weren't necessarily answered there if you're down to answer them
Absolutely,
right now.
yeah.
Our first question is actually from Gonzo in Buenos Aires, and he asks, how long can it take to complete an investigation for breaking the rules, and are there any specific timeframes?
There isn't a specific time frame. What we want to avoid at all costs is making decisions without having all the information. So we do our diligence to dig, and to make sure we have everything before we make a decision. In some cases, teams are willing to sort of just give us the information so that we know exactly what's going on. And in those cases, it's easy to make a call, but oftentimes we have to do quite a bit of digging, and that can take a bit longer. So it's not black and white of having an exact amount of time.
Absolutely. And the next one actually comes from Andre, who wants to know, what are your views on discipline in esports? Kind of a broader question.
Yeah, that is, it's pretty high level. I think discipline is really important. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that everyone's playing fair, to give everyone an equal chance at winning. And discipline is there to ensure that those things are happening. And so that's why it's so important. It's not about just discipline for discipline's sake. It's about really making sure that everyone's having a level playing field.
Yeah, what good are rules necessarily if there's no enforcing? It's a really strange thing to walk back and forth. Actually, finally, Phil Anthropy asks, Dear Pope Allen, do you have any words of wisdom for the faithful of the Church of Leaguedom?
God bless you, child.
Thank you very much, Nick Allen. It was nice having you here.
Yeah,
Some nice league
thanks, that's
clarifications.
great. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Now that is a glorious beard. Now let's turn our focus, however, to the North American half of the LCS, beginning with a look at the 10 teams who will be competing in the 2015 Spring Split. Team Solo Mid, Cloud9, CLG, and Dignitas all return with the same names, but only Cloud9 has an untouched roster. Meanwhile, Team Liquid, formerly Curse, Team Impulse, kind of the old LMQ, and Winter Fox, mostly the evil geniuses, all sport new names and logos this split. And finally, there are 3 new North American squads, Team Coast, Gravity, and Team 8.
There have been plenty of roster moves throughout NA as well. And here to help me break down what we think are the 5 biggest lineup changes are Kobe and Freak. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. LCS is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It starts tomorrow for Europe and for us in North America a few days from now. It's actually worth noting the only team in North America, Cloud9, is starting the same players from last split. So there are a lot of changes to choose from for this list. First up, actually, number 5, it's Team Solomid's new jungler, Santorin. Now, Santorin was a member of Team Coast in the Challenger Series. This year, he's going to be facing off against his former team as a member of Team Solomid, who are the defending champions. Really big shoes to fill in that sense.
Right.
And he's a player who hasn't necessarily lived up to the pressure in the past. I'm looking forward to see how he does on TSM with a coaching staff and some time to develop.
Yeah, the cool thing is he was a good jungler as far as Challenger was concerned. Of course, he's in a bigger league now, and that is going to be more difficult for him. We've only seen him once, and that was at IEM San Jose, and TSM did not look good there. They got crushed by Unicorns of Love, but as you said, they've got the staff behind it, they've got some practice time. Hopefully he does live up to the hype, because I think TSM really wants to defend that throne.
Yeah, and the way that he kind of failed at IEM San Jose was fairly typical of newer players on bigger stages. Yes, he was on Coast, but there's a lot more pressure playing for TSM and those TSM bans. You could really tell, especially as a jungler, just whenever you're scared to make a move like that or scared to take risks, then you just become a lot easier of a target for the opponent team.
Yeah, all the jungler does is take risks,
Yeah.
it seems like.
Yeah, it's kind of the entire point of it. But of course, now next up is going to be number 4 on our list, and that is another jungler. It's Rush, the solo queue god of Korea. He's rushing in to fill a jungle role for Team Impulse.
Hardy har, rushing in to fill a jungle role. Honestly, though, I'm really intrigued by this acquisition because if we look at the history of Korean talent moving to North America, it feels to me like the ones that have team experience have succeeded and the ones that are supposed to be these untapped prodigies have been the ones that fell by the wayside. So this guy, great solo queue experience, not much team experience, and he's not going to be speaking the language. So it's stacked up against him, but I really want to see him perform.
And the thing is, Rush is going to be their shot caller. He does speak English fairly well, but they also haven't even had time to practice with each other. So this is going to be a completely random group of guys that are going to be in the LCS now, and they're going to have a new shot caller that just comes straight from solo queue. So
yeah,
good luck.
I do think there is some track record, though, of solo queue guys actually doing very well in competitive environments. My big example being Faker. Had a team built around him, and SKT won the World Championship that very season. So is Rush the Faker? That's probably a bit lofty.
Maybe a little.
At the very least, there is an example of this happening, right? There's always a chance this does work out.
There is always that chance. Up next, at number 3, we have Counterlogic Gaming's not quite so legal acquisition of Zion Spartan. Now, Zion, he's going to be on his 3rd team in 3 LCS seasons. And he's going to be replacing Seraph in that top lane, something that CLG have had a lot of trouble with the top lane. But it's going to be, at first, a good thing for them. They're going to have a threat in the top lane, take some pressure off of Double Lift. At first glance, it seems like a good move for them. That's always sort of been Zion's style, play more carry-oriented top laners and split push, but it's going to have a pretty big impact because he won't be playing in the first week either.
Yeah, so I guess we have to wait a little while to see how much that roster change actually matters. The big thing I have with this, though, is that CLG tried to carry top laner back when they acquired Voyboy in Season 2, and the CLG way of top laners was to mold them into the protect the double lift top laner, just make him play Malphite, make him play Shen, things like this. If they can let him actually play his own style, if Zion gets to be a big carry, CLG gets to mature as a team, I think it's very good for them.
I mean, that's what I hope happens. If we think back to when they had Voyboy at the Season 2 World Championships, it's a different team. Right? Yeah. They have Double Lift and the name CLG, and Hotshot GG is doing something with that team. Like, that's it. Everything else is different. Different coach, different laners. I mean, it's a new start for Zion Spartan once again. He seems to be like a fast starter, weak finisher. At least that's what it looked like on Dignitas in his last few days at Coast. So I'm expecting a fast start when he enters the lineup.
Yeah, should be a whole bunch of fun. Now, next up, we have another move that will have a huge impact on the LCS. It's Team Impulse's acquisition of Season 3 World Champion Impact in the top lane.
Yeah, and really he fell off a fair bit at the end of last year, but I think this is a great time for him to have a new start. This is a player with a ton of experience, World Championship experience, and this should reinvigorate him in my eyes. It is his time to shine, and it's one of the most popular acquisitions for me personally in the LCS.
Yeah, I think it's a really big deal. He's a great player, and he's replacing the former Season 3 runner-up. So that's going to be fun just to see, like, do the shoes get a little bit bigger?
Godlike to Impact.
Wonderful.
Right. He won, so
must be better.
And at least he does share the main language with their shot callers, so it'll be a little bit easier for Impact to work with the jungler on this new team, but it's going to be a whole crazy bag for this new TIP team.
Yeah, absolutely. And while Impact's move to NA is huge, it's actually another Season 3 World Champion from the same team, obviously, that ranks above him on this list. Piglet joins Xpecial and Team Liquid in the bottom lane. This is a really interesting move because Piglet has so much talent and drive.
Yeah, and it's a big move for multiple reasons, not just because of, how big a star Piglet is, but also because this is a huge change for Curse as an organization. Since Season 2, they've always had the same AD carry Cop, and they would just switch out supports and bring in all these different supports for him to work with. Now, they're actually changing AD carries over to Piglet. It's going to be a completely different story. You already mentioned his drive. He leveled up an account from level 1 when he came over to North America. He's been putting in a lot of time over here. Yeah, it only took him about a week, but he put in all that time and effort as soon as he got over here. And the Curse guys also have been doing a good job of, welcoming him over to North America and trying to integrate him into the team lifestyle so that he feels part of the team.
Yeah, the one tricky thing, though, I think here is that Curse has repeatedly brought in these, all-star talents from everywhere else. They got Edward from Gambit for a while. That didn't change anything. Quas, I think, was a good pickup for them at the very least. I think Quas is probably their best acquisition to date. Piglet might end up doing really well. The one also really fun thing here is Curse just every single time ends up getting 4th place. Piglet, thankfully, got 4th place in his own regionals right before this happened, so he's a natural fit for the roster.
Yeah, the one thing they have to watch out for, though, is the adjusting to North America or even getting over here. I saw Piglet in the stands of an LCK match earlier, and Xpecial even vlogged about some of the issues they're having getting those guys over here. So that will be interesting to see, but once they get in there, I can't wait. But we do also have storylines because we've done the 5 top player acquisitions, and hey, why not just do the top 5 storylines heading into these games on Saturday as well?
Yeah, so we've already mentioned Impact, Piglet, and Rush, and there are going to be 5 other Korean players on the North American LCS squads this split. We're going to have to see if this is actually what's going to be good for these guys. We've seen a lot of foreign imports. Some of them work out. Some of them don't go very well. I personally like Bjergsen. He went well for TSM, but we mentioned before Seraph didn't do well with CLG. How well are these foreign imports going to keep doing?
I think there's completely different levels of what it means. If you're importing European players, it's very minimal as far as the impact, as long as they're not offended too much by the culture, and it depends how homesick they get. But it's a completely other level if they barely speak English and they're now playing League of Legends with these guys. And a lot of it is just a case-by-case basis. Some of these kids are able to adjust really quickly, and some of them are going to have some big issues.
Yeah, there's so many things you have to account for when bringing a new player, not only onto a new team, but over into a new country with a different language. it really depends on the player and the psychology of the actual person. For me, though, I'm going to be keeping an eye on two teams that had pretty much their rosters blown wide open. They lost a lot of star power, and they did their best to fill up these holes with new people. I'm talking about LMQ, which is now going to be TIP, Team Impulse, and also Dignitas. So LMQ, they went to the Worlds.
And they almost made it out of groups. They were in the group of death, and they did great.
Right.
Started out 2-0.
Yeah.
Didn't go very well from there. But yeah, there's a bunch of star power there. It's only Xiao remaining.
Yeah, so Xiao is going to be the only person that's actually returning for that team. They are bringing in a lot of people. As we mentioned already, Impact and Rush. Those are some pretty high-powered guys. However, they're also going to be using a bottom lane from North America. You know, WizFusion, now Apollo. Good name change there. But we'll see how he does with his new support because, as I said, Rush is going to be the shot caller for this team. He's the Korean solo queue star, and he does speak good English. However, Xiao doesn't speak very much. And as we said, Impact cannot speak any English, so it's going to be really hard for those guys to work together. Meanwhile, Dignitas, they also brought in Koreans, Core JJ and Gamsu, who are decent players, but not really all-stars, not going to change the game for these guys.
Yeah, and we didn't see Dignitas perform extremely well at IEM either, but it takes time for these things, and especially a team like Dignitas, they're bringing in foreign languages. That's going to take a little bit of time to kind of mature in there.
Yeah, the Dignitas one, I'm not I'm not really excited about. I think it's going to be a really, really rough road for them.
Hey,
you're worried?
This happens every time for Dignitas.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, they're going to suck. And then they go 8-0 and like, we're back, baby! And then they almost get relegated. Like,
I believed in them when they first
every
picked up
time.
Shifter. I thought that was going to work really well for them, and it did at the start, and as Dignitas does, they petered out. But actually, I do want to get back to Impulse. I actually believe in their bottom lane. I actually think WizFusion, Apollo, and Adrian are actually going to do pretty well. That everyone's kind of understating them. It's the foreigners that are big. I think it's actually a really good bottom lane.
All right, you're on the record. If they don't do well, freak's wrong. Anyway, I want to talk about CLG because they did have a bunch of changes, but they are one of the few all North American teams. And CLG is so intriguing because we always talk about CLG's potential. But seriously, this time, Zion Spartan in the top lane, the fact that Doublelift and Nafamu are returning, I really need to see if Link and Xmithy can pull this team together because I feel like the bottom lane is a given for success. Zion Spartan is a given that he can at least win his lane. And if they can bring it all together, they're going to be really good, especially because all these other teams will have communication issues, cultural issues. CLG shouldn't have any of these, and they'd be poised for success.
And everybody on that team had to go through tryouts, except for Doublelift and Aphromo, to get back onto this team. So everybody has put in a lot of work to get there. You know, there was all these questions around Link, or, you know, around who's going to be the jungler. Those guys worked their butts off to get on CLG.
And I actually am really excited for Xmithy specifically because we're talking about all these Season 3 World Champions, Piglet's showing up, Impact's showing up.
Yeah, where was he the last year? It just comes back out of nowhere.
Yeah, but also Smithy specifically went to Worlds as one of the top spots from NA when he was on Vulcan back in the day. Back in Season 3, he was arguably the #2 jungler in North America at that time behind Meteos. This guy brings him back up to that level where he's the second best jungler in the NALCS behind Meteos. CLG's got a freaking amazing roster.
It's hard to, you know, come out of professional
Hotshot
retirement.
GG was the best top laner in the world at one point.
I know. I just like to really believe in people. It makes me sound dumb a lot, but I like to be like, look, he was this good. Maybe we'll see it again.
All right, you're on record.
Yeah, on record once more. I want to see Xmithy do well. And as we wait to see if CLG can finally live up to their potential, there are 2 new LCS teams this spring split, bringing a lot of LCS old school veterans back in with them. We're talking about Gravity here, formerly Curse Academy. They've got Cop in there, Bunny Fufu in there, St. Vicious in there, all these guys that were on Curse. And these guys are trying to make themselves do just do great back when they were in the LCS. Team Coast is the other one. They've got some EU players coming in. They've got Jesses and Impaler. Those guys were having some sort of middle of the road performances. They got imported, they got dropped from their teams. Coast wanted them. These are these rosters of almost retired pros who proved they were good enough to get back into the LCS, and now can they prove that they're good enough to get to the top of the LCS?
Hey, that's going to be another one of those storylines. St. Vicious, he's seen it all. So, he's just going to be the chillest person in the LCS, win or lose, it feels like.
I like the relaxed way that he handled getting back into the LCS, too. He just, okay, yeah, we're back, guys. I'll be here for another split. See how it goes. I guess we got in.
If not, I can just stream.
Yeah.
That's just done. Anyway, we can't look ahead at the NALCS without looking at the most dominant team in the LCS over the last 2 years, Cloud9, obviously. Now, since entering the LCS back in 2013, Cloud9's won 2 LCS splits, earned 2 straight trips to the quarterfinals of Worlds, and they're also the only LCS team to start the same 5 guys over the last 3 splits, not even mentioning they're the only team starting the same roster from last split. So I'm really excited to see if these guys can continue their domination. They had a good showing at IEM. They do have that solid core group. I'd be worried a little bit about exhaustion and wondering if it's been so long with them never being able to take it over the top and if they get bored in the NLCS. I think that's what they're going to be battling against.
I think that's one good thing about how League of Legends, though, is kind of controlled, is every season a lot of big things changes, a lot of new jungler starts now. Like, I do think that actually really helps with the longevity of players, where it's like, oh, I get something new to adapt to every single year, or sometimes mid-season when you have big changes like the AD carry itemization updates back in like 4.12 or so. I think that definitely helps keep people revitalized and keep that drive alive.
It's one of the things that Cloud9 has always really held dear is their love of the game. All these guys love playing solo queue after they're done with their scrims. We see them all streaming pretty much every day,
Yep.
and they've got full scrim blocks all those days too. So they really like playing this game. The other thing is they didn't change their roster, but they are the team that did have to move. So they, I think, are going to be the only North American LCS team that's not actually living in LA now. It's just a short plane ride away up to San Jose or whatever, but that is a little bit of a factor you always have to take into account, having to commute every day.
Interesting discussion I had with Jack, their owner. He actually thinks that move will benefit them because they'll get more communication time after the game, but that's all up for debate.
Force them to be in a plane and talk to each other. There's no
It wasn't any
internet.
good enough.
Yeah, Jack, they're all like, Jack, is there Wi-Fi on this plane? Nope.
Yeah, definitely not.
You have to talk to each other.
Thank you very much, guys. 5 biggest storylines. That's going to all be kicking off on Saturday for North American LCS. But let's actually send it back to Riv to take a look at some fantasy.
Yes, the Fantasy LCS is back and better than ever thanks to a couple of cool changes. So check it out. New this year, you can trash talk with live chat during your draft and continue to smack talk all season long because there's also message boards. And we're all pros at that, right? It's all the fun of Twitch chat, but now you'll be insulting people you actually know. Also new this year, you can share your leagues publicly so everyone can watch you own your friends. Plus, you can change your team names during the season to troll them even more. And finally, the lineup lock times have been adjusted so that NA and EU now have different times for those last-minute change-ups. So get moving and head over to fantasy.lolesports.com. Create your own league of 4, 6, or 8 players, draft your fantasy team, and dominate your friends when the action starts tomorrow with the first LCS games in Berlin. And now for more PrimeTime League, the action actually started last week as we assembled a fantasy league of our own. And the draft went down like this.
Hey everyone, welcome to PrimeTime League's Fantasy League of Legends Legendary League, or the PTL FL4 for short. I don't know, the name isn't that long, right? But anyway, guys, we put together a really fun 8-person Fantasy League of Legends league. It's going to be great. It's a lot of names you guys are going to recognize. First off, Shox, everyone welcome her to the league. Now, she is a great hostess and everything else, but NA is better than EU, so Shox, well, she's going to have to lose to me every week. Next up, Xpeke. Xpeke, of course, a very good mid laner, but the only thing worse than a European LCS mid laner is an ex-European LCS mid laner, so Xpeke is going to have to be expected to be X'd out of this league. Snoopy will also be joining us here in the league, and now he did help Crepo lose some weight, but I'm just going to help him lose. Artie, everyone welcome him to the league. He's a great up-and-coming DJ, but hopefully his music libraries have some sad violins that he can play for himself when he loses every single week. Freddie Wong will also be joining us here in the PTL FL4. I think he's going to need some really good special effects work to try to cobble together videos that look like him winning, because the footage will definitely not show any of that. Chris Cluey will also be joining us here. Now, unfortunately, this time around, I'll be punting him out of the league. Imagine Dragons will also be joining the roster here. Even with 4 of them, I think they're still going to have to imagine themselves winning any games at all. Obviously, I'm the best fantasy LCS player of all these guys, so I've got the best roster. In fact, even my bench is better than most of these teams. That'll do it, guys. Thank you very much for joining us for our first ever draft, and I will look forward to beating you guys every single week.
I'm going to say that sounded a little one-sided,
Yeah,
Freak, but
maybe a little
the teams
biased.
look like they could be pretty good. So I got a question for you. How did the draft go down, and who do you think walked away with the best team? And don't just say yourself.
Well, I have to say myself, I'm sorry, Riv. Honestly, I think I followed some rules that I made for myself that were pretty smart. Drafted a lot of Europeans because they score more points. But it was a lot of fun. We got a whole bunch of us together. We Skyped it up. Actually, Dan from Imagine Dragons was on vacation at the time, so we phone called in because the hotel Wi-Fi wasn't good enough. So he's on speakerphone. One of the other dragons putting him into the Skype call through that. But everyone stuck around despite a couple tech difficulties, and it was a whole bunch of fun to draft.
Well, it looks fun. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But let's actually look at the Week 1 matchups, Freak. How do you see those playing out since somehow you're a commissioner as well as a participant? It's got to be against some rule.
No, it's fine. I'm going to be doing great. So I'm actually up against Imagine Dragons in the very first week, and I generally rank teams based on what teams the players are from and how I expect the teams to do in their opening weeks. We've actually got very similar teams, the big difference being that I've got guys from Elements, he's got guys from Team Liquid, and unless TL gets out to a good start, I'm expected to win that matchup. Reckless is going to score me a lot of points. Next up, Shocks versus Chris Cluey, and Shocks has a very well-diversified lineup full of great players from great teams, but Cluey, he's kind of relying on Link and Doublelift, and they don't have Zion Spartan for the first week, they don't have Scar for the first week. It's going to be kind of difficult for those guys to score points. Also, Altec without Crepo might not do very well either. Next up, Peke versus Artie, and Peke is putting so much faith on this new started Fnatic lineup. I think they'll be slow starters. I don't think he's going to score a lot of points early on. I think that's going to be difficult. Meanwhile, actually, there's players from Gambit like Edward on the roster for Artie that are going to be big point scorers. I think Gambit are underrated right now in the preseason, and they'll do well. Finally, Snoopy versus Freddie Wong. And these, to me, Riv, you asked who are the best teams aside from myself. I think these two have the best team. This is a very close match. I do give the edge, though, to Snoopy because I think Frog is going to score a lot of points and Pobelter on Winter Fox. I don't know if they've actually got a great lineup for themselves. And so even though Pobelter is a great player, I don't think he's going to score very well if his team loses all the games.
All right, Freak, it looks like it should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you can avoid tons of losses, and you're going to need it. We're less than 24 hours from the start of the 2015 LCS season, and to celebrate the opening week of games, Riot released this Legacy Challenger Ahri skin.
Challenger Ahri is available until February 2nd, but if you'd like to try and win one of these skins now, you can send your answer to our PTL Twitter question of the week. Question is, who were the 3 most played champs in the mid lane during last year's LCS regular season?
That's right. For the next 24 hours, tweet your answers to @LOL Esports with the hashtag PTL for a chance to win this Challenger Ahri skin. And speaking of Ahri, we have the top 5 plays that the nine-tailed fox pulled off last year from our coverage of the LCS and Worlds, or as Faker can already call them, the Penta. Coming into the Penta, number 5. These were some awesome plays. We see number 5, Selfie, cleans up with a double kill.
But they're not aware of their mid laner coming towards them. Genji's going to get focused. Diamond comes around the side, gets caught out. He's going down very low here, and it's Selfie coming in way too late, but it's going to be nicely grouped up. He should get enough damage down. Genji's in trouble. Mimov teleports in towards it. Eddie going down as well. He gets caught out. Diamond gets taken down, and Selfie just runs through the entire team, gets himself a double kill.
Sneaking in at number 4, it is Shifter's solo kill onto Bjergsen.
Daydreaming and intended won't give him that time. Oh, the fog of war! Such an old tactic being used, but still such a good tactic.
At number 3, it's Tenones with the charm over the wall to pop Wicked.
They're going to try and push up mid as quick as possible. Alliance have to swing around and sweep and try and cause this one. The charm catches on Wicked.
No way.
Tenones goes in. He's got him. He takes him down.
Our number 2 play shows that being underneath your own turret doesn't mean you're safe from Selfie's Ahri.
Candy Panda. Oh, it's going to get Dobon. There is the kill. And that's what happened.
Well, Flash Charm. That was a great play.
And coming in at number 1, Shifter rushes in to take down the Nexus.
Goes Daydreaming. Taking another one. He was trying to do what he can. Shifter with the lick spin on. Oh my God. Spirit rush. Still goes the kills. The second, he's not going to get it. Oh my God, he does get it. Oh my God. Yeah. We won again.
Awesome plays from that year. I'm getting chills remembering them and getting ready for the new ones to come up too. And speaking of the Penta, If you see a play that you think is worthy of being included in PTL's weekly top 5 plays, make sure to hit us up.
Yeah, just mark it with the hashtag #ThePenta and send it to @LOL Esports so we can use it on PrimeTime League.
That's right, and we will, if it's a good one. And remember, it doesn't have to be a penta to get the hashtag Penta. It just needs to be an incredible play. For instance, here's a play that definitely warrants a hashtag the Penta, as Faker proves why he's a senpai to us all.
Okay, here we go. Banky coming in. There's a whirlwind as well. Faker someday tried to flash in. Nagne manages to get the kill on the Banky, but overall, KT getting pushed back here. Marin gets kicked away, and Meganar is there. There's a nice ult on the score, and Bank's going to pick that one up. Faker had laid down orbs. There's the ult on the Nagne now. Oh, and a nice
Faker with
stun.
the plays on the Nagne.
That is Faker.
Watching that play.
Oh my God. When I
You're
saw
just
it live, your eyes were just drawn to the screen because you heard Monty, you heard Doa, and it was Faker, so you knew a play was being made.
Well, first off, I was like, what is he doing? He just ulted. And they're like, oh, he had a plan.
He always has a plan. And now, while we're getting set to kick off the LCS spring split in Europe and North America this week, over in Korea, they just started week 3 of their season.
Yeah, and even though the newly named League of Legends champions Korea, LCK, is missing some of last year's veteran star power, there are plenty of organizations that are looking to take advantage early on in the season.
Yeah, that's right. One of those teams is CJ Entis, who entered this morning's best of 3 against KT Rolster with a shot at tying GE Tigers for the top spot in the league. Checking out the highlights from these games, CJ and KT were just head-to-head the entire time, but neither could really find the fight they wanted. You see 30 minutes in, it's a pretty even game.
This first game was just so slow, and CJ just relentlessly tried to push into KT Rolster. You take a look at these team comps, they are so tanky and low damage. Naramundo in the top lane, and these fights, they're a little long.
And even despite the win in this fight for CJ, it actually didn't go that way the entire game. KT was just too strong coming into this matchup.
Yeah, this was a win fight for CJ Entis, but they really didn't get much off of it. It was so low. Just fast forward a few minutes and we have another fight. Remember, the death timers at this point in the game are so long, and Sumday's Gnar ultimate into the wall there was massive, and it really won them the game.
Amazing that Gnar is getting through in different regions now, because you see the impact he puts into the game, and like we said, we saw CJ putting up a good fight there, but KT able to answer back and continue to do so. Heading into game 2, much stronger start for CJ here, but they couldn't get that W.
Yeah, big thing about LCK over in Korea here is, well, it is a best of 3. And CJ Entis after that first game was like, no messing around. These next 2 games were a display of skill by CJ Entis, and Space had a great performance.
Yeah, they looked to really turn up the heat in this one and really didn't let KT breathe the entire time. You were looking at these guys last year, yeah, they ranked top, they're still looking good, but they are vulnerable.
Pretty much undefeated. They are undefeated if you only count the victory of the best of 3 scores, which is all that matters in that league. So the 2-1 is a win, and they're undefeated.
So now let's take a look at the LCK standings, if you haven't recently, with their victory this morning. CJ Entis is now tied with GE Tigers for first place. But those 2 teams will meet on Saturday, with the winner owning the top spot.
Yeah, SKT2-1K is right behind them, with the former world champions looking to improve their position behind Faker, leading the charge from the mid lane back to the standings here. And one thing to note is that the LCK matches are each a best of 3, as we were just saying, while their overall win-loss percentage determines their place in the standings if they're tied. So you can see here that while CJ and GE are tied in match wins, GE actually has a 6-1 overall record, while CJ is 6-2, which will give GE a slight edge if it were to end today. So remember, the top 4 teams head to the playoffs.
And now for a closer look at the LCK, we are honored to be joined by OGN's Chobra. How's it going, Chobra?
Good, thanks, Riv. How are you?
Not too bad, man. You guys have a jump start on the LCS already. How are things going so far?
Yeah, well, we've had 2 weeks of matches so far, and already we're seeing a big difference in skill gaps compared to the previous seasons, actually. In the previous seasons, we've always kind of had the clear favorite, one team that everyone guessed was going to go to the World Championship, that was going to win the season. And sure, we've had upsets on the way, but the season always started with the same storyline. This season, it's not the same story anymore. We're not seeing just one team at the top, and even if it was, it's not SKT anymore. That's the big thing, nor Samsung. And so we're seeing a lot closer matches, or even if a team wins, the games are going a lot longer. We've already seen games that go the full best of 3. And so I think we're in for a real big treat in 2015.
So what team are we looking at out of Korea right now that's kind of toppling things over?
Well, it's actually a big surprise for anyone who's been following the Korean scene for a little while. It's going to be CJ Entus and the GE Tigers. Now, this is shocking because the GE Tigers, for one, the team brand itself is not under Kespa, and two, I mean, some of these players, while they've been on previous teams, they weren't really at their prime when they joined the GE Tigers. On the flip side, we have CJ Entus, who, of course, has the biggest fan base still in Korea, and they've just been around for such a long time. They have a really big rep. But the past full year, they've really just been underperforming, not even getting second place and things like that they used to every season. But this season, both teams are so far undefeated in the first 2 weeks.
And you were talking about SKT actually not being one of the teams that's on the top. What has the thorn been that these teams are finding to drive into the side of SKT?
Well, you know, SKT also has dealt with a little bit of a roster swap, and I think they're still kind of figuring things out. At the same time, because of the roster swaps, these other teams seem to be more comfortable now just focusing Faker down. I mean, we've had the term come up now, welcome to Camp Faker, where junglers have just been camping Faker in the mid lane the whole time in the early portion of the game. Sure, Faker's been able to come back out of it a few of those games, but at the same time, without the threats of Impact and Piglet there, teams seem to be a lot more comfortable focusing down Faker, and Marin and Wolf and Bang, they're still kind of leaving time to see if those players also need to be targeted in future matches.
All right, and you mentioned CJ Entus earlier. What's kind of the highlight surrounding them right now?
Well, if you've been a CJ fan, you know that it's been a tough time in Space Prison. Space being their AD carry in the bottom lane with, of course, the really famous Mad Life as a support. They haven't really been the shining star of CJ Entus for the past year, but this time around, both of them are back in their prime. I want to remind everyone that Space actually, when CJ Entus kind of grouped together under that brand, Space stayed on the team with the old Azubu teams, and Space was supposed to be an AD carry who's going to rise as a star, but then he continued to just perform at the same level without showing improvement, without adapting to the meta each season. But 2015, finally, after season after season after season, he's here to shine. He's made some amazing plays. He stopped a team from getting Baron all on his own. I mean, this guy really deserves to be the MVP this year of CJ Entus.
And moving on a little bit, what can you tell us about Najin's bot lane?
Najin bottom lane, so this is interesting because right now they have two sets of bottom lanes working on their roster. And this is interesting because in 2015 we are allowing those substitutes to come in between sets. So in a best of 3 we could see different rosters all 3 sets. And Najin's a team that's been taking advantage of this quite often. Everyone expected OQ to be the go-to AD carry, despite Zephyr having had the starter spot on Najin for a little while, because OQ's younger, he's a little bit more aggressive, he's supposed to be a rising star, there's so much more potential in him, and yet they've used Zephyr to start in certain matches, especially we've noticed when Najin feels that the opponent needs to be handled with a little bit more consistency, with a little bit more experience. On the flip side, OQ and Kane have shown up to play now and then, and so I think Najin's still trying to figure out which teams, they want to use certain bot lanes against. For instance, against CJ Entus, they didn't use OQ and Kane, and they pay for it.
And looking at all the teams grouping together, get some matches to watch here. What are your thoughts around CJ Entus versus the GE Tigers coming up?
Well, so far this is going to be the battle for the top spot. Whichever team wins this one is going to have gone 4-0 in the first 3 weeks. And that's going to just sound amazing for either of their managements. So I think this is really the match to watch. And right now, I think it's hard to tell because CJ Entus has really shown up out of nowhere. I mean, the preseason, they were still underperforming. I mean, all the CJ fans around the world were just saying, it's going to be the same story again, guys. We're just going to sit here and cheer for our team because we like them, but we're not sure what to expect. Not anymore. At the same time, Smeb in the top lane for GE Tigers, he looks like he's ready to battle with the top tier, such a shy on CJ Entus. So, I think it's going to be a really fun best of 3, probably going down to the last match.
Awesome. Thank you for all that info, Chobra. We look forward to hearing from you again very soon. Now, let's shift our focus to the region that must have spent nearly $1 zillion to import the Korean talent they hope will end Korea's dominance of LOL Esports, China's LPL.
Yeah, last year, Starhorn Royal Club made it all the way to Worlds with 2 Korean stars, Insec and Zero. And this year, many teams are trying to mimic that success by signing every member of Samsung White and Blue collectively to their lineups.
True story. Well, most Chinese teams stocked up on Korean imports. The biggest move of of the offseason might actually have been made by OMG as they ganked world-class AD carry Uzi from their rival Starhorn Royal Club.
That was huge.
Last week, Uzi and his new team took on Vici Gaming and their new roster, which includes Dandy, Mata, and former LMQ AD carry Vasily. All right, and coming into game one of this best of two, you can see here in the bottom lane, a beautiful three-man Syndra stun coming from Cool. This fight changed this one.
Yeah, this was after a whole bunch of rotating and turret pushing by OMG, and eventually VG just decided they had to fight, but they were down a little bit. OMG had the run at them strategy here with Sivir just piling through, and some cocky, arrogant play gives them a 29-minute win.
Yeah, just coming up onto 30 minutes like you were saying, and you look at the amount of defense that they can put up against OMG, but it's just not happening. Like you said, OMG with full control of the map. And it looks like game one goes to them quite easily.
Yeah, Vici, even with the Vasily, Dandy, and Mata, really what looks like 3-4 acquisition just because Vasily was here last year, not the best opening for them. They look to bounce back in game two.
It's going to be interesting to see what they can do. And once you've seen your opponents once, you'd hope it changes for the second time.
Such a fantastic catch by Heatong there onto Cool. Being able to catch a Xerath as Azir actually shows a pretty big hole in Cool's positioning. OMG playing very cocky in this game, too.
And they continue to look strong throughout this one. These fights actually go on for quite a long time, so it's really putting each of these players to the test.
Yeah, and whenever you're fighting in the same place for too long against an Azir, you lose. And it actually gave this big gold lead for Vici coming into this 45-minute fight, but 5 dragons was on OMG.
You see Loveland trying to go in, a desperate move on that one, and they do pick up some good kills for themselves coming out of this.
Yeah, and actually because of the 5 dragon buff and because they got so many kills, look at those 70-second death timers. They were able to win despite being down over 12,000 gold. Another 2-0, as every single match in the LPL last week was ended up 2-0.
It's going to be hard to catch up in points if you keep getting 2-0'd and you're those teams with the O. After 1 week of LPL action, let's take a look at the standings right now. At the top of the boards, we have 5 undefeated teams, as Jatt was just saying, at 2-0. But with each team having played only 2 matches so far, that will definitely be changing.
And as you might have noticed by that last column, the LPL works off of a point system, so teams are awarded 3 points for sweeping a best of 2 2-0, 1 point if there is a tie. There were none of them last week, and obviously 0 points if you lose both games.
And now that we had a chance to look at the standings, let's bring in someone who can shed more light on the Chinese scene, Julian Pastry Time Carr. Pastry Time is the English language caster for the LPL, which you can watch live 3 nights a week on LOLesports.com. Good day, Pastry.
Hey, Riv, how are you?
Not too bad. So what can you tell us about the LPL so far? How are things going?
Well, I think the one thing everybody wanted to know coming into this was, how are all these Korean players that have just come into the LPL all of a sudden playing? And I think, to be honest, they've all played really exceptionally well. If we want to look at the players that are maybe living up to the hype of how they used to play, you got to start with Kakao and Rookie. Oh my God, are these two still so good? Kakao feels like he's at home as an aggressive jungler in China, and Rookie is still the superstar flexible player that has amazing synergy with his laner there as well. Kind of moving through to some of the other players as well. Deft and Pawn, also look like they're comfortable on their team. Pawn is playing the same sort of flexible team fighting style that he was known for in Samsung White, but a little bit more reserved on EDG. And Deft, man, everyone pretty much just calls him the Korean Name, and to be honest, he's been playing about as well as Name was on that team. So maybe an upgrade there as well. I guess we'll see moving forward, but he's also been playing fantastically. And Imp, man, is Imp still good. I think he wanted to prove that it wasn't just Mata that was carrying him and that he's actually a really strong player. And at China, like the region home to the world's best AD carries, especially with all these Korean imports coming, Imp is contending for maybe top 3, possibly the top spot as you move through the rest of the LPL. So those guys have been doing fantastically. Unfortunately, not everyone has been living up to their hype, and I think the easiest place to go is that Lupa and Dade have not been playing to the same level. Lupa picked Annie into Na and just sort of felt a little lost. Dade's been picking well as well. He's playing Azir and Jace quite a lot, but even if he gets ahead in lane or has a good lane, he's never able to convert because the synergy is just not quite there with his team. And I kind of feel the same way about Dandy as well, whose big counter jungling style just isn't quite there with his team when he doesn't have the same level of experience and communication with them. And I didn't want to put him here, but Spirit, who's been playing fantastically, looks a little lost on World Elite. He's a great jungler, but he's been playing big carry junglers like Riven, like Rengar. And again, the synergy is not just there. So all the Korean players are playing well, but some of them have fit fantastically into their teams, and other teams are still finding their synergy.
Well, with a little of that hype on the players, we've been hearing a little bit of hype about Snake. What's the story surrounding this team?
Snake, man. Snake are this team that I think when you looked at them, seemed like maybe the weakest team on paper as well. But Snake have really just become a really fun team to watch. They kind of came in from a lot of people's efforts for just being maybe not the worst team, but the team that everyone expected and kind of put low on their rankings. But man, Flandre, this super hype beast of a top laner. We've heard about his carry potential. We've heard about his fizz. We've heard about his LeBlanc AD and all sorts of craziness. Flandre has lived up to the hype. He hasn't played any of his crazy picks yet, but he's been playing Rumble and Aurelia, and he has just dominated people. Super smart player, mechanically brilliant, works well with his team, and that was the biggest thing for me with Snake. It's not like a one-man army where Flandre is just trying to carry out of the top lane. Everyone is pulling their weight. Their jungler beast is just that. He is incredible, playing Nunu and just counter-jungling the pants off of Jarvans all weekend. And the rest of the team, the bottom lane looks solid, their mid laner looks great as well, and the Korean support Ella as well, who's also joining Beast as the less-known Korean players that have been playing for a little bit longer in the LPL, look really scary. So Snake, still early days for them, but as far as like an amateur team that's been around for maybe 5-6 months, they look scary in a region full of really scary teams.
Well, talking about strong picks all around there, I kind of want to still focus on top lane, as Gnar has been kind of finding his way through the ban phase over in China. What's the deal with this?
Well, sometimes Gnar finds his way through the ban phase, and then sometimes he gets through and everyone instantly regrets their decision. Gnar is insane in China especially. Everyone already knows that around the world, he's a strong lane bully that doesn't really need to build damage to be effective. And he's just been, bullying top laners and being a super safe, super flexible pick and a first ban pick everywhere. The thing that makes him incredible in China as a champion, though, is that when he goes into Mega Gnar, his team fighting prowess is amazing. And Koro and Gogoing, two of the star top laners from China, have just flexed their muscles on that champion. The Gnar ultimates in big Chinese team fights have been super influential, and almost every time Gnar has been picked, he's just dominated a game.
All right, Pastry Time. Thanks a lot for the LPL knowledge. See you next week.
Cheers, mate.
We've talked about the changes around the LCS this year, but things are changing around the world as well. Last year, the 5th region to gain an automatic berth into Worlds was Southeast Asia. But now that region has 2 major leagues. The newly created League of Legends Master Series, or LMS, has split off from the GPL. The new league is made up of Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau, and will have a berth at this year's Worlds. They started their games 2 weeks ago, so let's see how their 8 teams are doing. The Taipei Assassins are currently undefeated and at the top of the standings with a 6-0 record, while AHQ Esports Club sits in the middle of the pack at 4-2. We'll be checking in to see how both of those teams from last year's World Championship and the rest of the LMS perform when their season continues tomorrow. So let's bring it around the world as the LCS season starts up this week. The European LCS will begin with their first 5 games tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central European Time. And what better way to start than with a boom, as Reckless, Froggen, and Elements take on the new Fnatic in their very first match of the season.
Then the Clash of the Titans will continue when the North American LCS kicks off their first 5 matches on Saturday, with TSM facing off against who else but Cloud9. Those games start at 12 p.m. Pacific or 9 p.m. Central European Time.
And while you can always get tickets to join us in the North American LCS or in Berlin's new studio for the EU matches, there's also another way you can watch the games with a crowd of LCS fans, and that's at an LCS viewing party. If you are in New York this Saturday and 21 or over, check out the opening games of the North American LCS at the Sports Bar in Webster Hall with fellow fans. Hit up lolesports.com to RSVP and get more information about the upcoming viewing parties throughout the U.S. We do have some late-breaking information for everyone as PTL strives to keep you up to date. Due to a variety of unfortunate situations, several North American teams have had to make last-minute roster changes, at least for Week 1.
Yep.
We want to give you a quick heads up so you can adjust your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, unfortunately, as had been maybe predicted by some, Piglet will be out at 80 carry for Team Liquid, and Keith McBrief will be subbing in for him.
That's right, and Impact, the next one, will also be out for the top lane of Team Impulse, with their sub, Rux, stepping in.
And that's not enough. Winter Fox will actually be short 2 of their starters. Avalon in the top lane and Helios in the jungle are both out. Yeah. Flare Z and Shorter Ace will be filling in for them.
And well, that does it for the very first episode of PrimeTime League. You have to remember those changes are absolutely huge, and they're really going to affect a lot of teams.
Make sure you change that fantasy roster. They're big changes, but it should hopefully be for week 1, and we'll obviously keep you up to date next week if anything changes.
Absolutely. We'd like to thank Chobra, Pastry Time, Freak, Kobe, and the EU crew for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you here with us each week as the League of Legends action heats up.
And you can see Riv and I this weekend during the North American LCS, but until then, let's watch Faker try to keep things on ice in our last hit.
이게 맞나?
아니 저거
정을 요거를 따다다다다다 이렇게 딱딱처럼 해야죠.
아 이렇게 하라고요? 아니 그거 반대.
조심 손 조심.
아 이렇게 하라고요?
네, 나